Hey everybody, Nick here, and I got a review for you today of an accessory. And that's for this little guy. This is my PM2. Well, maybe a big guy. And as you guys know, I bought the PM2 expecting not to like it, but I really have. And it's found a way into my life as kind of a beater, sort of hard use sort of knife. And I really, really liked it a lot. I like the compression lock. I like just all parts of it. And the ergonomics are just stellar. The one thing I do not like about this particular knife are the scales. This is the S35 VN Sprint Run, my favorite steel, for those of you keeping track at home. But unfortunately, that came with these brown G10 scales, and they're third brown, let's just be clear here. And that ain't so great. And so I figured I'd do something a little bit ridiculous, and I went online to my buddy Ripp, or I guess Steve Ripplinger, over at Ripp's Garage Tech, and ordered myself a nice set of copper scales. I do like me some metal, and indeed that's what these are. These are the scales right here. And initially, just out of the box, I'm pretty impressed with them. You've got really nice machining here. These are done by CNC, it would appear. And mostly on the outside, they're entirely deburred. And on the inside, they're pretty damn well deburred. A couple of little ones here and there. And you can see here, you got the cutout for the compression lock. And overall, I'm pretty impressed. They're pretty heavy, but yeah. So through the joys of movie magic, I'm going to go on ahead and install these guys on the knives and then probably use it for a couple of days. And then I'll meet you back here for the rest of the review. So it's movie magic time. You ready? Okay, here comes the magic. Here comes the magic. Bam! All right, so the scales are now installed, and in fact, they've been installed for about 8 days at the time of filming this here, and so I can really get into the actual nature of the scales, the good, the bad, and the ugly about them. And again, just to be 100% clear, I'm talking today about the scales themselves and not the PM2. The PM2 is a gem and is reviewed separately. So let's go ahead and get on into it. But first and foremost, these scales are just really beautiful. I really do like looking at these scales a lot, and there's something very, very nice about them. This pattern works well, and it's just beautiful and absolutely nice in that way. So that's really the best thing these scales have going for them, is they look really great. The fit and finish against the PM2 parts is pretty good. I mean, if you look right here at the liners, you can see that they match right up. And, you know, Steve Ripplinger, Ripp's Garage Tech Steve, said that these are really, the PM2s are a little bit variable, and so, you know, he's had people who have trouble, but my particular PM2 fit it just fine, with one exception I'll talk about later, which is a beautiful thing. The scales are plenty grippy. I don't feel like they're going to pull out of my hands, and the ergos are good. He did enough chamfering on the side here that, although, yeah, maybe it's a little bit less comfy than the stock G10, it's not enough that I really care. There's not a meaningful ergonomic difference with these copper scales, which is nice. I like the fact that he offers left-sided or right-sided as a separate option, which means that your presentation side is clean. You don't have all the extra holes for your left-sided clip like you do on the regular. And see, didn't this knife just get ugly when I put that back on there? Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. And then the surface finish on the whole is pretty good. It's got a nice reflective pattern to it. It's grippy but not too sharp. He did a really good job there. So that's the good of your PM2 with your copper scales here. A couple of bad things here. First off, the machining had some imperfections that kind of bugged me a little bit. I had to do a little bit of sanding to get some of the burrs off, and still, you can see there's a ding here that wasn't addressed at all. There's another ding up here that wasn't addressed. And there's a subtle burr that's kind of all around the outside of this scalloping texture. I'm going to see if I can highlight it on the camera, but there you go. You can kind of see it along the bottom there. And so it's not bad. It's not like I cut you open, but it's something I would have liked to see a little more effort on the part of the maker here. So, yeah. There's some sharpening issues, meaning that some of the the scales are a little too sharp in places, particularly the little corners. Like right here, at the edge of these liners here, this little corner is very, very sharp, and enough to cut you open, and that's no good. I could take these off and chamfer that down a little bit on my own, but I kind of wish that he'd put in a little extra effort to make sure and knock down some of those edges and chamfer a little bit more. And similarly, the inside edges here are a little bit sharper than I'd like to see. Tumbling would help that, but it would cause trouble with the surface finish, but even, 2 minutes with a file would have gone a whole long way on this. And for $105, which I don't think is out of left field, by the way, that's not a bad price for a big chunk of copper that's well machined. But I feel like he could have done a little bit better than he did in terms of knocking down those last little defects. It is copper, and it's untreated, so it will leave a bit of a coppery smell in the hand. And particularly, I imagine if I was sweating, these would be very, very, well, your hands would smell like you'd be holding on to pennies all day. So that's just a factor. But the big issue in the bad category is the weight on these. And of course, I was warned about this. Steve Ripplinger told me flat out, these are some pretty heavy scales. You got to be aware of that. And so I walked into that. But they are really freaking heavy. Heavy enough that when you hang it in the pocket, particularly if you're on a pants where the sides of your pockets dip down to the center, the knife will gradually work its way down during the day, just because it's heavy enough that gravity's keeping it down there. To give you an idea, the stock PM2 is 3.9 ounces, and your copper scaled PM2 now is 7.13 ounces. That's a lot. That's damn near doubling the weight of this knife. To give you a little bit more understanding, it is heavier than a PM2 and a Spyderco Delica, stacked on top of each other. It becomes heavier than my Graham Razel, than my Norseman, and in fact, it's just freaking heavy. To give you another understanding, if you were to take a bunch of U.S. coinage here and put it in your hand alongside your PM2, here we go. The copper scales add the weight equivalent to 10 U.S. quarters and 7 U.S. nickels. I ran out of quarters. Sorry about that. But that's a fair amount of weight to carry around in your pocket on top of your PM2. And so that's something you really got to keep in mind. You end up paying the price in terms of weight if you want it to look as damn good as these do. So that's something you got to have in mind. So those are the bad things. I feel like the machining could have been done a little more carefully, at least the finishing sure could have. There were some visible defects in the one I got around the edges and elsewhere. And the PM2 was a pain in the neck to take apart, by the way, but that's got nothing to do with Steve. Be careful about that. You can see the amount of red Loctite that they used in putting this thing together. That was a little rough. It leaves a bit of a coppery smell in the hand. It's $110, which isn't cheap, but I don't think is a rip-off. It's not a rip-off. Get it? Ripp's Garage Tech? Nope, not a rip-off. Sorry. And it's just freaking heavy is the big thing. So that's the bad. Let's go into the ugly real quick. Two ugly things here. First and foremost, like I said, taking the PM2 apart was a pain in the neck, but that's on Spyderco and the amount of Loctite they use. But actually putting together the PM2 with the copper scales was a pain too, and for one specific reason. Everything else went together very nicely. But the lanyard tube on your PM2 is actually a tube, and it goes all the way through the scale. You can kind of see the border of it here. The issue is that on the presentation side, it just did not want to go in, flat out. And I pushed, and it didn't happen. And so I looked in there, and there was a little, I couldn't tell exactly whether it was a raised bump or that was just the play of the light. But basically, in order to mount this scale, I needed to take out my Dremel and do a little bit of, give a little bit of love to the inside of that hole there. Oh, God, that's wrong. And anyways, needed to polish out a little bit of metal on the inside of the copper hole. And when I did that, it fit on just fine. Now, I don't know whether that's an issue on the machining of these particular scales, whether that's an issue with my particular PM2's particular lanyard tube, but anyways, either the tolerances are a little tight on your scales, or they're not quite tight enough. And that meant that for me, I had to do a little extra work to install it, and for somebody who doesn't have those tools handy, they would have had a problem. They couldn't have gotten this on there. And so that's something you gotta keep in mind. At least this particular unit needed a little bit of extra love. I hope that was just an issue with my Spyderco, but keep in mind if you're just working with a pair of screwdrivers in your college dorm room, you might have a little bit of trouble. The other ugly thing about this is that it actually changes, because these scales are so damn heavy, which, is something you walk into. I'm not going to call the weight ugly, but it changes the center of gravity pretty heavily on the knife. The PM2 balances nicely stock with this kind of a grip, with the hands in the finger choil, and it works out very nicely. But here, the balance point moves further back, so that the knife balances right about here. And that means that although it's very comfortable to hold in this grip here, that's not the real intended grip. And when you choke up, it feels like the knife is trying to fall back up and out of your hand. And that's just not ideal. It throws the balance of the knife, and that's actually a functional issue with the knife. I mean, oh my God, the balance is off. But at the end of the day, I do want my tools to function well and look pretty. And at this point, you're losing a little bit of the function in exchange for a lot of pretty. So that's the ugly, that there was that issue with the lanyard tube here, and then it just changes the weight distribution in a way that's just not ideal. So what's the final verdict here? Two things. First off, I do like what Ripp's Garage Tech did here, and I do recommend them as a people. Well, Steve, I suppose, as a person. Very happy that I did the order. He's been very kind in all of my correspondences with them. And it is very, very well done. I'm nitpicking pretty hard here, but this is a $105, $110 set of scales, and they're done out of an expensive metal. I'm not dragging them over the coals too hard for having a couple of machining imperfections here and there. That's a question of time. So I do like the work that Ripp's Garage Tech did here, and I really do like these scales, certainly at the cosmetic level, and also they're just, oh man. The problem is just that function trade-off. And so if you're looking at these copper scales, or frankly probably any copper scales for your PM2, know that you're going to pay a price here. You're going to lose a little bit of function in the balance and in the increased weight in order to get this form. I'm actually contemplating trying to sell these guys off and pick up a pair of titanium scales because I love the feeling of the metal scales on the PM2. That makes this just a much nicer knife. But the weight and the balance thing is just a little off for me. But I don't know. Maybe I'll keep it around in this configuration, and I sure as hell don't want to go back to the ugly old third brown scales. So that's kind of my verdict. The Ripp's Garage Tech scales are very, very nice. They're very, very pretty. They're very, very heavy, and they change the weight just a little bit. I'm hoping that as Ripp's Garage Tech continues to up their game, the perfection on the scales will get there. And for now, they're quite good for the price. So if this is interesting to you and you're willing to take those compromises, I really highly recommend it. So there you go. I hope this has been helpful, and have yourself a wonderful rest of your day.